and welcome to the Board of Directors meeting for December 5th, 2017. I'd like to welcome everyone that's here with us to help us do our city's business. Thank you for being here. At this time, let me ask the city clerk to read the roll.
Director Hendricks, Director Richardson, Director Peck, Director Hines, Director Wright, Director Wyrick, Director Kapuras, Director Fortson, Director Adcock, Vice Mayor Webb, Mayor Studla.
Here. Let me call on City Director Ken Richardson for our invocation, please.
Please bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for allowing us to be here to meet tonight to do the city business. We pray for the family of the young mother and the children who lost their lives to senseless acts of violence in our city. We pray for an end to the senseless acts of violence in our community. We pray for the safety, security of all the city employees, and we pray that we do the best of our ability and do your will, not our own personal agendas, to carry out the city's business. These things we ask in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. If you would, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on our agenda is a presentation dealing with an award from the Environmental Protection Agency to our Little Rock Water Reclamation Authority, and I understand Greg Ramon is going to be helping to do the honors on this. Is that correct?
I will, Mayor.
You want?
And I first like to say, Mayor, City Directors, Bruce, thank you very much. This is actually pretty exciting for us. I want to acknowledge I've got the chairman of our commission, Mr. Richard Mays, as well as Mr. Pete Hornibrook is here in the audience. I've got Hal Anderson, and I've got Kanita and my wife. How's that?
Wonderful. Welcome all.
Want to start by saying that, we've been working really, really hard to meet the consent order as well as the settlement agreement to mitigate sewer overflows. And one of the tools that we use has been the replacement of sewer services, sewer laterals. And the sewer laterals are they're a private part of the sewer system, but they create the issues just as well, and it's one of those things that we need to deal with. In 2012, the city directors requested that the utility come up with a way to be able to help homeowners replace their sewer service. And with a lot of work with not only the city directors as well as Bruce and his staff, we came up with a program, and that program was initiated in 2013. And you can see on the screen, the program, basically the homeowners are allowed up to $2,500 to replace their entire sewer service. And what the intent of that is that if they replace the entire sewer service, $2,500 would be deducted from that bill. That would be funded with a $1 per month fee on the residential bill. And the really cool thing about that is it got rid of a lot of substandard pipes in the system. The program has been a win-win situation. It's a win for the homeowner because homeowners that are having issues with their sewer get that removed and they get new pipes put in. But just as well, it's a win for us in that we've got a lot of the stormwater that would generally get into a system. Those pipes get removed from the system. Studies have shown about 35% of the stormwater that gets into our system actually gets in from sewer laterals. The problem became such a win-win. The big problem that we had with it is that we didn't have enough funding. At one point, we had about 9 months delay in being able to get the funding necessary to pay homeowners for the service that they had replaced. And we had to find a way to do something different. And what we did is we started working with the Arkansas Natural Resources Natural Resources Commission, and we started talking to them about the revolving loan fund program and how we could potentially use some of that money to help offset or to help replace or add to the program. And we worked very close with them, and I want to say that Mark Bennett and Dave Fenter, as well as Bruce Holland, have done a tremendous job working with us. They worked with EPA, and through EPA, they got permission to be able to do this. What does all this mean? All this means is that now for the next 5 years, we've been able to double the amount of money that we have available to replace sewer lines. We no longer have a waiting list of people, so if people need their service replaced, they contact us. Of course, we provide a little more information than what I'm providing you, but at the end, we do have the funds available to do so. So that's a great thing. We get probably once a month, we'll get a call from other utilities asking us how the program works, and I'm really excited about it. I'm glad that you guys had the foresight to require us to do this, and I do appreciate it. And Mayor, I don't know if, would you like to say a couple words?
Only thing I'd say is that since I've been on this board and come on here, our CEO, Mr. Ramon, has done a marvelous job. And the commission is very appreciative of all the work that the utility has done, and we're very proud of the staff. And that's really all I want to say. I'm going to keep it brief.
Thank you.
Sir,
Rick.
I'd like to just bring up Mr. Holland. Bruce?
Well, Mayor, I'm here to recognize your team and my team both here. This is an example that the state of Arkansas, every city in the state should recognize the work that's done here, as well as it's an example across the nation. You can see by the map up there, we're one of only 5 awards that's being presented for this accomplishment. So I want to recognize my team again, Dave Fenter, Mark Bennett. These guys, instead of just looking at a problem, they said, this is a challenge, let's find a solution. And what a great solution they found. So congratulations
Thank
to
you.
everyone
Thank you, Mr.
involved.
Holland. Thank you.
Yes, sir. There you go. Thank you, sir.
Mayor.
Well, we're very happy to receive the Pisces Award, and it's a strong indication of the volunteerism that we have on our various boards and commissions, and I want to thank our Water Reclamation Board for all the hard work they do. I know we got some seasoned commissioners on there. One that's still with us, Mr. Hornibrook, thank you. So we can now move on to
Mayor.
the items on our agenda.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Before we get into the agenda, since we're in the celebratory mood, I'd also like I'd also like to announce about 3 weeks ago, the city of Little Rock at our Promise Garden on 12th Street, we received a $30,000 grant from the EPA to recognize the work that we're trying to do to address the fact that that area is a food desert, and also our attempts to help develop a green job corps to help address some of the unemployment, underemployment efforts in that area. And that's the first of its kind in Arkansas since 2002, Vice Mayor Webb. And Mayor, we had a $30,000 grant for Promise Garden we have on 12th Street, where we're trying to help address the fact that that is a food desert, and really having young people understand the values and importance of gardening in the community, and also help us figure out a way to deal with some of these vacant lots that we have in some of these parts of our community.
Very good. Perhaps we can get another update on that. I know we've been doing a lot in the area of food deserts and working with not only our Love Your School program, but our mobile market, and this is just another example. I think somewhat of a challenge is getting the community to realize or understand how many wonderful opportunities the city has gone after and been successful in receiving in terms of a variety of those kinds of issues. And so,
Yes, sir.
thank you for mentioning that, and hopefully we can get some more information out to the public about it as well.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, on to the agenda. We're going to go ahead and go with the consent agenda at this time. Items 1 through 8. Madam Clerk, if you would, please read those items.
Mayor, do you want to have a motion for the modification first?
The sponsor doesn't wish to withdraw it,
Okay, thank you.
or the sponsors, I should say. If you would, go ahead and read the consent agenda, please, items 1 through 8.
A resolution authorizes the city manager to enter into agreement with Cut Quick Corporation in the amount of $70,080 for the purchase of one slope cutting riding mower for the Public Works Department and for the purposes. A resolution authorizes the city manager to enter into a contract with Nick Ruffin Excavating Incorporated in amount not to exceed $239,373.60 for the Kings Road Drive Drainage Improvement Project and for other purposes, funding from the 2012 3/8 capital improvement sales tax. A resolution authorizes the city manager to enter into a contract with JCI Construction Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $113,721.60 for the Pecan Lake Area Drainage Improvement Project and for other purposes, funding from the 2012 3/8 capital improvement sales tax. A resolution authorizes the mayor of the city of Little Rock, Arkansas to accept for municipal purposes permanent construction easements, right-of-way dedications, and fee simple acquisitions, and the city manager to acquire temporary construction easements as needed to complete the construction of the 2016 through 2018 street and drainage capital improvement program and for other purposes, funding from the 2012 3/8 capital improvement sales tax. A resolution authorizes the city manager to enter into a contract with American Construction Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $124,997 to build a communal cat room as an addition to the Little Rock Animal Village and for other purposes. A resolution authorizes the city manager to execute agreements with Presidio Networked Solutions LLC for an amount not to exceed $67,530.40 plus applicable taxes and fees to upgrade the city's wireless network that's in operation at city facilities and for other purposes. A resolution authorizes the city manager to enter into an agreement with Comcast to install, configure, and maintain a fiber optic network between the City of Little Rock Data Center and the City of Little Rock Police Training Academy and for other purposes. A resolution authorizes the sale of approximately 5 acres of property at the Little Rock Port to Dakota Investments Incorporated to authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute any necessary documents to facilitate the sale and for other purposes. That concludes the consent agenda.
Mayor,
There's a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda. Is there any discussion?
Mayor, before you do so, on number 8, the title should show approximately 4 acres. That got clarified late this afternoon.
Approximately 4 acres. All right, we'll note that as a Scrivener error. Thank you. All right, hearing no discussion, all in favor of the passage of the consent agenda indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. The motion has passed.
Mayor,
Yes.
I just realized that I think the rules say the first Tuesday of the month, the citizen communication is after the consent agenda, and that was not listed on the agenda.
Okay. We alternate, just for the public's edification on this, we alter the consent agenda in the first and third meetings of the month. And so after the consent agenda, we give an opportunity for people who wish to speak to us on items that are not on our agenda or have not been brought to our attention previously. And I have 2 cards. The first card is from Noel Washington. Mr. Washington.
Good evening. My name is Noel Washington. For the past 30 years in excess, I've been coming down here preaching to the city board. But for what? Now, I moved down into my father's home, who passed away over the Christmas holidays last year. And since then, my wife gone, and they done killed my dog. I called Bruce Moore's office twice, and I called the mayor's office twice. No one called me back. And the excuse, well, we didn't get it. That's a lie. You got it? And your sister that took the message, she almost started crying on the phone because I told her. Now let me share something with you. 65 years ago, I was born. And my daddy moved me into that home at 3003 Chester Street. And I decided to continue my daddy's legacy. Because I didn't want to drive by 3003 Chester and see a lot stating that's where we used to live. Now let me say this right quick. Now you took 9th Street from us. And you took the East End from us. And the South End is the oldest black neighborhood that's left, and you're trying to take that. And the reason that I know, because the city code enforcers, they don't go on their jobs. They don't come to the South End and work and write violations. Why do I know? The city not building any houses in the South End from Arch Street to Martin Luther King. It's nobody going down there to clean up the streets, to cut the yards. Why? Because you wanted to come down and tear down for you all rich guys to come in there and buy it for a song and a dance, and then when the prices is so elevated, the blacks can't afford to come back in it. But I want you to tell you today, I'm not going nowhere.
You do not, and please do not slam on the podium anymore.
Well, I'm trying to make you understand something.
We can hear you quite well.
I'm tired of coming down here. And my taxes, I pay taxes like everybody else and probably pay just as more taxes as anybody in here. And I want to see something done, and I want to see something done quick. And for your person to tell your sister, tell you that she didn't get the message, she's a lie. And I done called your office, and then I done had Bruce. Yeah, you have came down in the neighborhood and try to rig the streets, but why do I have drainage ditches on my block? Still today, no drainage ditches on my block. You should have fixed that many years ago when you brought it in there. Now,
Thank you, Mr. Washington. We heard it, and I talked with you previous to this meeting, and I'll be happy to talk to you after the meeting if you'd like to wait. And I'm sure that Mr. Moore will make himself available for you as well.
and if you didn't hear me today, I'll be back next Tuesday, and I'll be back every Tuesday until God takes my last breath.
Thank you, sir. Next card I have is from Kathy Wells.
He forgot his keys. He forgot his keys.
Mayor Stodola, members of the board, I'm Kathy Wells. I'm here tonight as president of the Coalition of Little Rock Neighborhoods. We were quite distressed to see that you preempted any environmental assessment on the 30 crossing proposal for expansion to 10 lanes of the interstate through our city, which won't come out for a month or so, by your actions to grant the state highway director what he pressured us to give him. I think that you were wrong. I think that we need to wait until this action has been provided. As I have worried from the beginning, let me bring this back to you now. There may be enough money for this particular proposal. There is none in sight for the inevitable consequential next expansions. They clearly state in writing would be required for this to be a meaningful expansion at the 630 junction and the two others along the way. Please do not proceed with the proposal that you have authorized, the December vote for the Metro Plan Board that will follow your lead, and wait for the environmental assessment. Very serious issues remain unresolved, and we have good reason to think that a conclusion of the federal assessment will be that more needs to be done, more study is required, and an environmental impact statement will be required. The state's rush to this judgment, the state's pressure on you to rush to this judgment is bad government and poor public policy. Please do not proceed down this path for all our sakes and our future funding. We talk about the budget's broke now. What's going to happen when this lands on our heads? Please. Thank you.
As a matter of clarification on that issue, let me explain to the board that the process of amending the Transportation Improvement Plan was to be consistent with an action that the Metro Plan Board already previously took regarding the statewide transportation plan. And while I understand Kathy Wells's concern, the environmental assessment issue is, and its analysis is done by the Federal Highway Administration. It is not done by Metro Plan, and they will make a determination based on its release on whether or not further environmental review through the NEPA process has to be done. That is not something we control. That's something that's controlled by the Federal Highway Administration. So once the environmental assessment is complete, it will be reviewed by them in Washington, and they will make a decision independent of the Highway Department, independent of Metro Plan, on whether or not it is adequate or not relative to the concerns that many people have expressed. The process with both the county judge and the city of North Little Rock, all being consistent on that issue, is to simply bring this before the Metro Plan Board. That decision has not been made. All that's been made is a decision to go ahead and issue the notice for the public hearing that is necessary. It requires a 15-day notice, and there is a likelihood, I think, that this decision will be before the Metro Plan Board on December 20th. But independent of that, the environmental assessment will be reviewed by the Federal Highway Administration, and they are the ones that make the decision on whether or not there needs to be a greater degree of scrutiny given through the NEPA process, the National Environmental Protection Act process. Okay, thank you. That concludes our citizen communications.
Light is on.
Sorry, go ahead, Director. Go ahead, Director Hendricks.
I wanted to ask you, come up with your comments. Could you expound on that article that was put in the paper? There was something further that the procedure would go ahead. Can you share that? I didn't bring the article of all times.
What does it pertain to?
I-30.
Well, I think I just did. That was
No, you
what the
didn't tell the
article did. That's what the article referred to. I think it referred to, well, it doesn't refer to it directly. I think Resolution 10 that you'll be dealing with here shortly deals with the article in the newspaper.
And it says that it will go forward regardless.
Well, when we get to that,
Okay.
when we get to that resolution, Director Hendrick, we can
No, I just wanted to comment
talk
right,
about it
right
further.
back behind Kathy.
Okay. Well, we're going to get there here very shortly. The next item is item 9, a resolution. Madam Clerk, if you would read Resolution 9, please.
A resolution to authorize the city manager to enter into agreement with Fire Trucks Unlimited for an amount not to exceed $412,420 to refurbish one fire truck rescue unit for the Little Rock Fire Department and for other purposes. A portion of the funding is from the 2012 5/8 cent operational improvement sales tax.
There's a motion and a second to adopt this resolution. Is there any discussion? Oh. Hit your number.
Mon? Yes.
We're having a little bit of technical difficulty here. If you'll try it one more time. Director Peck, you're recognized, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry about that. Yes, I had a couple of questions about this, and maybe the chief could answer them.
And it might also be Director of Fleet, Willie
okay.
Hinton, but
Sure.
depending on the question, I
Okay,
guess.
yes, thank you. The question was, well, a couple of things. This seems like a lot of money to refurbish a 20-year-old vehicle. So I was wondering what kind of lifespan we expect to see from this. And the other question was, this $412,000, couldn't we do something a little more meaningful with this, like get turnouts, by turnouts, or is that a funding restriction Just seems like a lot of money for a 20-year-old vehicle.
Right, and let me try to clarify that and explain that to you. The strategy is and has been, with the condition of our fleet early on in my tenure as a fire chief, we were looking at mechanisms to improve that fleet and improve the life expectancy of that fleet. So we started along the process of doing refurbing some of the units. We started with a 1993 ladder truck. You're going to get an additional 10 years of life out of that unit. And when you're looking at the cost of that unit, a brand new ladder truck will cost you $1 million today. We got that unit refurbed for $262,000. We did a hazmat unit, which is a sister to the unit that we're getting done now. And that unit was roughly $300,000 to get that unit refurbed. It's a frontline piece of equipment now. We'll get another 10, 15 years out of that unit. The strategy behind this rescue unit was we passed a tax in 2012 to fund firefighters, fire stations, all the equipment, and things of that nature. Station 24 is one of those fire stations. That is 24 firefighters and 2 pieces of equipment. We know that the money is there for the fire station to be built, but we don't have the money to staff the fire station with 24 firefighters. So initially, we're going to staff that fire station with 12 firefighters. Since we had the incident in West Little Rock where we lost an individual because we were not dispatched, we decided to put a rescue unit in a western portion of the city. We've got one at Station 16 that supports Rescue 2 on 2nd on 9th and Sherman. Station 21 on Chenal supports the Arkansas River as well. So Station 24 is going to be a rescue house as well to support efforts in that part of the city. So we had to spend the money that we have now existing on apparatus. We couldn't save that money and spend it on a rescue unit. It wasn't enough money to buy a rescue unit. So we bought 2 engines that are being built as we speak. So fast forward to a year and a half, 2 years down the road, where the money is available for us to have a rescue staff at that station where we don't have a rescue unit. So we bought a rescue unit in 2015, I believe the year was, and this unit was taken out of service. So we're going to refurb this unit. It's going to give us another 10 years of life in this unit, and it serves 2 purposes, Director Peck. And those purposes are, if we have a unit that goes down, a ladder truck that goes down out of service, we can put someone on this unit when it comes back. We're using it now. It's in horrible condition as we speak. I can show you 30 slides of all of these units that we've repaired or refurbed, and they take them down from the top to the bottom. Rebuild the engine, rebuild the transmission, the drivetrain, the whole works. It looks like a brand new truck. It operates like a brand new truck. So when you look at $400,000 as opposed to $650,000 or $70,000, I think is the right approach for us to take as an organization to get this done now. And when the time permits itself, and maybe Willie can speak to it, with the plan that he's putting in place for a replacement, we'll have the funds to get a new rescue unit. But now the funds are there. There's $250,000 that he has available from fleet that we can't use for turnout gear. I'm supplementing that $250,000 with what's called Act 833 funds.
I'm familiar with that.
Right. So we're using a combination of those funding sources to get this done. And I think the organization is going to benefit greatly from that approach.
So the rescue unit, you say a new one would be about $650 to
$650,000 to $700,000. That's in today's dollars. So you're talking about a couple of years down the road.
Seems like to spend $418,000 and we can have a new one. It's just difficult to understand. Understanding funding restrictions and if it must be spent on an apparatus and not on turnouts, which we're all concerned with. But that's a portion of the money, of the fleet money that must be spent on an apparatus.
Yes,
Is that right?
the vast majority of that has to be spent on that. And so, I mean, the funding is there for us to do that with, and I would ask the board to support that approach. And maybe Willie might want to add something as it relates to his plan on the replacement process for the fire department. Willie?
Thank you, Chief.
Mayor Stowe, members of the board, one thing that I can add to what Chief said is I'm not a huge supporter of refurbishments, but for the rescue units and some of the aerial trucks that we have, I am supportive of that because of the cost of it. We have another 24-year-old unit that we need to get out of the system right now. So, and Bruce asked me to put together a long-term plan to say how we actually fund aerials, engines, and as well as rescue units. So this year, or in next year, we need to get that rescue unit refurbed, as well as get the aerial truck purchased that's 4 years older than this unit. So with the funding that we have possibly available out of sales tax money and what Chief was able to do, we determined that was the best avenue forward, because the 24-year-old unit is almost $1 million to replace. So that's what we're dealing with over the short term. And it will add 10 years to the life of that rescue unit. So that's what I can add to it. And I fully support him doing that, or us doing that.
Director Richardson, you're recognized, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Willie, you may have answered this for me in your reference to Bruce's request from you, but Chief, if you can come back real briefly, sir. Your requests, when you come to us with requests like these, they're based on an overall assessment of the fire department needs and/or available resources. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
So this is not done in isolation. It's based on a thorough overall assessment of what we need as a city for our fire department, and also what we have available in terms of resources. And that's where we had that long-term planning kick in. So this is just something that's part of an overall need that we have long-term. Is that correct?
That is correct, and we discussed these approaches thoroughly with my staff. We come to the conclusion what's best. Now, we don't always agree.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, I've got to do what I think is best for the organization and for the citizens.
But this is not a unilateral request. This is based on you having conversations with your staff, various staffs at various levels, to kind of do an overall assessment of what we need in terms of equipment and vehicles, and in conversation with Willie in terms of.
Oh, most certainly, most certainly. This is not a decision I made without consulting the fleet, director of fleet service, because after all, he's responsible for all of the vehicles within the city, so you're absolutely correct.
Thank you, sir.
Director Hendricks, you're recognized, please.
Thank you. I hope I'm not redundant, but I wanted to ask you, Chief, had you been contacted earlier about the question that you received tonight?
No, I've not. As a matter of fact, this is the third unit that we're having refurbed, and I've not been questioned about any of the other two.
I was curious. Would you share with the persons that are here and also with the city how your department stands with that rating? Because I've been boasting about it to the people in my area. Will you share that?
Yes, I'd be more than happy to. The ISO Class 1 and the international accreditation, when those agencies come in to look at your organization, they look at it holistically. They look at your personnel, they look at your staffing requirements, they look at your equipment, they look at all your processes that you do. So they were very aware of the approach of refurbing that we were doing, because it's not brand new to the fire service. It's done throughout the fire service. As a matter of fact, the new fire chief will probably tell you that they do the same thing, have done the same thing in Memphis. So it's not brand new. And I do understand that when you look at the $400,000 amount, we probably could have got it done a little bit cheaper, but there were some things in there that I just didn't want to compromise. And it cost us a little extra money to do that, and that's a lighting system. And I wanted to make sure that we had some of the best equipment once that unit came back in service.
I want you to tell where we stand as the city of Little Rock. You know what I'm talking about.
Well, I can tell you, I'm proud to say, and I would go on to say the mayor, the city manager, and the board would be proud to say that out of the 30,000 fire departments that we have in this country, 238 of those are ISO Class 1. I'm sorry, 230 of those are accredited. Of those 230 that are accredited, only 57 of them are ISO Class 1 and accredited. So that's really roughly less than 1%. So the Little Rock Fire Department is in a unique area of all fire departments within the United States.
You still haven't said that you were the one as to where we are right now. I want to hear that.
Well, it happened under my watch. Make no mistake about it.
That's what I want
But
to hear. I want the public to hear
I've
that.
I've got a very good staff of people that work with me and
Because
making
of
sure.
you.
Yes, making sure that we get the things that we've gotten. So yes, I can't take all of the credit, but it did happen under my watch. But trust me when I say I got a tremendous staff of people that works for the Little Rock
But
Fire
Chief, you
Department.
haven't said it yet. What happened under your watch? You know what I'm talking about. We're number what in the nation of all the fires? Tell that.
I just said we're number 57 out of 30,000 fire
That
departments.
came under your watch. Is
That
that
is
right?
correct. It came under my watch.
I want to hear.
Okay.
Okay. Nobody has a right to question you.
Any other questions?
Director Hines, you recognize, please.
So, and I don't know if this is for Willie or you, Chief. Is there any salvage value on these units? If we don't do it,
Excuse me?
is there any salvage value? Like, say, if we got a unit we're not going to refurb, is there any salvage value if we sold it to one of these refurbishers?
No, what we're doing is you get $0 for it. I mean, there's no value to it. I mean, you think about what we've done with some of the engines that we've had. We've donated those to other agencies, but this unit is 20 plus years old. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, thanks.
Director Wyrick, you recognize, please.
Chief, I want to thank you for the work that you've done with the fire department. We can celebrate your group and what you've brought together for the city of Little Rock. I want to ask a question. The fire truck that we're talking about refurbishing right now, what is it used for?
What is it used for now?
Yes, sir.
It's used in a reserve status right now. I mean, because we've got a new unit, so if an engine truck goes down and we don't have another engine to put them on, we can put them on that if it's available.
And you called it it's going to be a fire safety unit? And
A
what
fire
will it-
rescue unit.
Fire rescue unit, and
Yeah.
what will it be used for then?
It'll be used for rescue purposes when it is assigned to a new, to Fire Station 24 initially until we get a new one.
Where is Fire Station 24?
That'll be the station on Stagecoach Road,
That's,
your station.
I didn't know my station number, so that's the reason why I was kind of going around the world to get there.
Yes, it'll be
Okay.
out there.
So the truck that you're refurbishing will wind up at Fire Station 24 on
I mean,
Stagecoach.
if the funds are not there for $800,000, $800,000 rescue truck, then yes, initially would. But, the funding that we had available for that fire station, we purchased 2 engines with it. So one of them be for that station, and then the other one be assigned to Station 12 on Cantor Road by Steinmart.
Okay. And so the money that you're talking about putting in this will make it last for 10 more years, so we have to live with
A minimum of 10
We
years.
have to live with an old refurbished fire truck at Station 24 on Stagecoach for another 10 years?
Well, I can tell you, and I think Director Adcock brought that up about the fire trucks once before. And what we try to do is we try to put units where they're going to be utilized. So if you've got this truck that's going to be just like a brand new fire truck. I mean, the sister to that truck is the hazmat unit at Station 11 now. It's the exact same truck. They were bought at the same time, one for hazmat, one was for rescue too. We spent $370,000, $362,000 to get that truck refurbed. So it's a frontline piece of equipment, and they've been operating on it for the last 2 years, I'm sorry. So it won't be like you're getting an old fire truck. It'll be a new fire truck at that location until you can get the new refurbished truck, until we can get a new truck at that location.
Okay.
But trust me when I say safety won't be jeopardized. Firefighter safety or the safety of the citizens won't be jeopardized because of that truck.
Okay, and if we were purchasing a new truck for Fire Station 24, as I know what it is now, what kind of truck would we be purchasing?
We'll be purchasing an engine and a rescue truck.
An engine and a rescue truck?
Right, but
Okay.
since we're only staffing it initially with 12 fire,
Right,
we only need an engine out there for now.
okay. Mr. Carpenter, did our ballot title say that we had to have new trucks at the fire station on Stagecoach Road?
Director Warwick, no, the ballot title was general for or against the capital's tax and for or against the operating tax. You had a resolution that spoke about an intent of how the money would be spent, but that is not binding.
Okay. All right, I just wanted to make sure we were following the,
Trust me, we want to make sure too, so we.
okay. All right, thank you.
Director Adcock, you're recognized, please.
Mr. Moore or the chief, you said that in that there was money to buy 2 new fire trucks. And one of those fire trucks would go to Station 24 and the other one would go out by Steinmarks. How many other fire trucks would be at that station besides the one new one and the one that we're rehabbing?
At the Station 24,
24?
how many additional fire trucks will be there?
Mm-hmm.
That would be the only 2.
That's the only 2 fire trucks that'll be
I mean,
there.
it would only be 2 fire trucks there if there were 24 personnel there. So if there are only 12 personnel there, it's going to only be 1 fire truck there until the other 12 personnel have been hired and assigned.
Well, Mr. Carpenter, I think my question is something like Director Wyrick's. Was Southwest told they was only going to have 12 firefighters at their new fire station that's built for 24 people?
I don't think anything was told, but even so, the resolution is not binding from a legal standpoint as to how the money is spent. The money has to be spent for capital. If it's taken from the capital funds, it has to be spent for operations. If it's taken from operation funds. Oh, I'm sorry. Just better. In terms of the tax monies themselves, it was just for or against an operating tax and a capital tax. And the only limitations there is that the capital tax monies be spent for tax capital purposes and the operating tax monies be spent for operational purposes. What was in the resolution as to what to deal with, it's how the board wanted to spend that money, was an indication of what the board wished to do, but it was not a binding situation.
Okay. Mr. Moore, my next question is to you. Do we have any other fire stations that have 1 fire truck and 12 people only?
Sure. I think the other way to answer the question is, I just asked the chief, how many fire stations do we have? 24 firefighters, and that answer is,
I mean, your Station 9 on Shackelford Road is 24. There's Engine 9 and Truck 9. Central Station is a multi-company house, but there are more than there are more than 12 firefighters there on a day because you've got Engine 1, Engine 8, and Truck 1 in the bomb squad. So you're going to have more than 12 people at that fire station on that day. Then you got Station 4, which is Truck 4 and Engine 4. That'll be a maximum of 8 firefighters there on that day.
So you're telling me you've only got 4
I wasn't finished. Okay. And then you've got Station 18, which is Engine 18 and Truck 18. You have Station 21, which is Engine 21 and Truck 21. Station 15, Engine 15 and Truck 15. So all of those stations have a maximum of 8 people working on that day, and they could have up to 24 firefighters working at that station.
and let me just say, the decision that we've made is not to wait till we can hire 24 firefighters. Because going into a 2019 budget, as you all know, we look at revenue over the course of a period of time. And so I said to the chief, let's open it with 12. The ultimate goal is to get it to 24. But if we had to hire 24 firefighters late next fall, it would be very difficult. So the goal is to get it open. We're going to build it in 2019 or 2018 and open it in 2019 with the ultimate goal of getting to the 24.
Well, the chief answered me in a roundabout way how many fire stations have 24. But my question was how many fire stations have 1 truck and 12 people?
Station 3, 22nd and Payton. Station 12, County Road by Steinmart. Station 10, Kavanaugh. Station 6 on Roosevelt. Station 13 on Springer Boulevard in Roosevelt, Station 19 on Chico Road, Station 17 at the fire training facility, Station 16 on Highway 10, Station 23 on Rawlin Road, Station,
So it's usual to have one fire truck at a station with only 12 people.
that is correct.
And most of those are in areas where the houses are very close, and this station is going to be more of a rural fire station,
Well,
correct?
Station 20 is right there on Kirby Road by Coles. It's a multi-company house, but there's only one truck there. They have 12 firefighters. Station 23 on Rawlin Road, you can put 2 fire trucks there. There's only one there, and they have 12 firefighters. So, I mean, fire stations are built today with the possibility of expansion. So at some point, you might add a ladder truck to the western corridor of the city, and you've got room for them because you've got the station that they can accommodate them.
Where is the closest ladder truck to Stagecoach Station?
It'll be Station 18 right there at Otter Creek.
Across the freeway?
Right.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Director Hendricks, you're recognized, please.
I call myself the night watchman around here. You've done a darn good job. And you need to be commended. But the question that Joan Adcock asked you, that you were able to just rattle that off without looking at a piece of paper. And we're going to miss you. They'll see that.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Willie.
All right.
Okay, if there are no other questions on, sorry, Director Wright, go ahead, please.
I just want to comment. When I bring back up the fact that my kids don't have a pool, I don't want nobody looking upside of my head. All these questions about a refurbished truck that you know we ain't got $800,000 to spend. The man has already told. So when I bring up about that pool, with all these kids I got out there, nothing to do in the summer, don't be looking upside of my head.
Bruce, I understand you're looking for a refurbished pool. Okay. All right, all in favor of the passage of Resolution 9 indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. The resolution is passed. We can now move on to a reading of Resolution number 10.
A resolution to state the views of the Little Rock City Board of Directors that there should be no embargo or withholding of funds for approved government projects within the city, pending the outcome of public comments and hearings on the 30 Crossing recommendation of the Arkansas Department of Transportation and for other purposes.
Vice Mayor Webb.
Mayor Sotola, before you start your discussion, I was under the impression that this was not going to be on the agenda tonight. There was a request to change the language, and I think the resolution you actually have before you does not have a change language to Department of Transportation from the name of the director. So if this passes tonight, that will be changed and amended with the board's directions. I didn't understand that this was coming forward tonight. I'm sorry.
Speak.
Yeah.
Vice Mayor Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think there was some confusion because there was an effort that was made during the week to try to get an answer to this question, as we all had hoped we would have by tonight. And that effort was made today right up until 6 o'clock. And in just a brief discussion right as the meeting was started, there are a couple of others, in addition to myself, who would like to move to defer this until next week, because we're coming back we're going to be in recess, I believe, until next week to vote on the budget. I'm sorry. So I would move that we defer this until next week.
There's a motion and a second to defer. Maybe, is there any further discussion on it? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to defer indicate by saying aye. Opposed, say nay. All right, it'll be deferred till next Tuesday, and I know that the Metro Plan Director, Tab Townsville, sent an email over a few days back, last week sometime. I did check with him today on a couple different occasions, whether he had gotten a reply. He had not. And I checked just as we started the meeting, and he has not heard back yet. So perhaps between now and next Tuesday, we'll have an answer. Okay, we can now move on to the separate item. I'm sorry, I have two people who wish to speak on that, and I'm with a motion to defer to both Mr. Silverstein and to Kathy Wells. We'll be back. You'll be back. Okay, very good. You're always welcome. Okay, we can now have first reading of ordinance number 11, please.
An ordinance to approve a plan zoning development, establish a planned commercial district titled 15,000 Cantrell Road, short form PDC, located at 15,000 Cantrell Road, amending the official zoning map of the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for other purposes. First reading.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rules and place this ordinance on second reading. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, saying nay. Second reading, please.
An ordinance to approve a planned zoning development, establish a planned commercial district titled 15,000 Cantrell Road, short form PDC, located at 15,000 Cantrell Road. Second reading.
We suspend the rules and place on third and final reading.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rules and place this ordinance on third and final reading. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, saying nay. Third and final reading, please.
An ordinance to approve a planned zoning development, establish a planned commercial district titled 15,000 Cantrell Road, short form PDC, located at 15,000 Cantrell Road. Third and final reading.
Okay. I do have cards on this, but let me first go ahead and call on the applicant for their presentation, please.
Mayor Stodler, directors, Mr. Moore, Ms. Langley, Mr. Carpenter. My name is Bill Spivey. It's my privilege to appear tonight with my partner, Mr. Phillips, on behalf of the applicant, 15,000 Cantrell LLC. Let me introduce that we're pleased to have with us tonight two of the principals of the applicant, Mr. Landers, and Mr. Hornibrook are to my left. And shortly we will yield the floor to Mr. White, who's the project engineer, who will discuss and present to you the technical aspects. My habit has been that when I have done that, I've confused not only myself but you, and so I hope not to do that tonight. Thereafter, we are also accompanied tonight by Mr. Ernie Peters, who will offer some insights as to traffic matters. And thereafter, we'd like to reserve the balance of our time to respond to comments which we expect will be made by other interested parties. Let me take a moment, just for a minute, to clarify something. There was some confusion, I think, following the agenda meeting last week, and I have probably contributed to that confusion over the past week in some of my conversations with some of you. I may have said to you that this property has never been the subject of a rezoning application in the city. That's not precisely correct. It's come to my attention that approximately a dozen years ago, this piece of property and another nearby property were combined and approved as part of a planned office development. The underlying property, which is the subject of this application tonight, is a platted lot and was a platted lot before and remains a platted lot and has never been replatted to our knowledge. It's approximately 1.5 acres. It comes into the city with the underlying zoning of R2, and when the previous POD, and Mr. Collins may be able to reflect upon this, was either revoked or lapsed, it went back to that zoning. So in point of fact, that's the way it was before, but it has been involved in a previous rezoning application. So don't think that really makes any difference in terms of what our presentation here is tonight, but I don't want to leave any of you with the any incorrect information or misimpression that I may have given you, and that's my fault. Therefore, let us say that the application tonight seeks your approval of rezoning of this property as a planned development upon which will be located a Zaxby's restaurant. We hope that what you'll see from Mr. White's and Mr. Peters' presentations is that this property is appropriate for this use, that it can be constructed on there within the design standards for the design overlay district, and in fact, it complies with the design overlay district. There are no variances requested. The lot size is less than the minimum 2 acres, but it came into the city that way. So technically, that's not a violation of the DOD, it's just the way it is. So let me stop at this point before I do confuse you, and let me ask Mr. White to speak with you and to explain what the project's about, what the standards are, and after that, Mr. Peters. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Mayor and members of the board, got a few slides I wanted to walk you through. Mr. Carter, and he did get, thank you, Scott, for rotating that. So what you see in this aerial view is the area that we're working in. This is Highway 10 running east to west. On the lower right, you see the Taylor Loop intersection, which has the Walgreens on the northwest corner, Bank of the Ozarks southwest, and then the Murphy store that's just out of the screen. And if you move all the way across, you get to Rummel Road, which is not labeled, but is the road that turns and sort of doglegs left. So our site is outlined in black there, and it is roughly 1.5 acres. We have Regions Bank just to the east. You see that? Right there. So Regions is just to the east. We have Dr. Cloud's Dental behind Regions. And then to the west, we have undeveloped property owned by Dr. Span. We actually have letters of support from Dr. Cloud and Dr. Span for the project. Directly across the street, and I think this is significant, we have the Happy Days Groom and Board, just a pet facility for grooming and boarding pets. It's a commercial type use. So as you look at this piece of property, we don't have any residential development adjacent to it. And a few of the other uses as you work back to the intersection of Taylor Loop, you've got the Burger King, you've got the Kaufman by Design, and again, the Walgreens. And so just a mix of commercial and office uses there on the north side. The second slide is a color site plan. Excuse me. And I wanted to show you this just to go through the variety of the DOD requirements we had to hit on this. This site does have the 40-foot landscape buffer on the front. It has the 100-foot building setback. You've got the required landscape buffers on both the east and west side and the rear. The site lays out well in that you come in off Highway 10 or Cantrell, and it lines up for the drive-through around the building, circles back and comes back out. That driveway lines up directly across from the Happy Days, and so by lining those up, we don't end up with any left turning conflicts. Works very well. The next two slides are I just wanted to show you elevations of the building. That's a Zaxby's. That's front and rear, and then the other would be the side elevations. So it's a fairly nice looking facility. If we could go back to that first slide, Mr. Carter. We had a meeting with the neighbors, and I thought it was really productive. It was before the Planning Commission hearing, and they asked some questions that were good questions. And one of the things they asked was about the site distance for our driveway. And for if you've been out there and you've been to the Burger King, there's a driveway that's between Burger King and Kaufman by Design. As you come out of there and you look to your left back towards the Walgreens, which is to your east, at times the site distance feels a little tight. And the site distance exists and meets requirement, but I think the speed of the vehicles are moving so fast that it makes you feel like it's not there. But as you move to the west, to the Regions driveway, the site distance gets better. And then further to the west where this driveway is proposed, it gets even better. The required distance, site distance for this, for Highway 10, this location is 625 feet. We measured the site distance back to the east towards Walgreens. It was right at 800 feet. And then as you look to the west, more than 1,000. So we easily meet the site distance requirements. Another thing that came up in the meeting was drainage. And we probably had this meeting back in late summer, and so we were just coming off 3 of the big spring rain events that we had, and drainage is a big topic these days. And you can just see it to the lower left of this, but the large creek in this area is just comes behind that neighborhood to the southwest there. I think you can see it. Looking at the USGS website, the drainage basin south of 10 is 2,400 acres. It goes all the way up Henson to Pulaski Academy into the Pleasant Valley area. It's very large, 2,400 acres. This site is 1.5 acres, so it's less than 1/10 of 1% of the basin. So it's really an insignificant part of the drainage basin. But as part of the development of this site, we'll be required to provide stormwater detention, which will be reviewed and approved by staff prior to building permits. So we will meet the requirements for our detention. At the risk of getting into anything more on traffic, let me step back and let Mr. Peters take over on traffic. Yes.
Show me where Tully Cove is in relation to the proposed project.
Tully Cove is to the west. Tully?
Tully Cove?
Mm-hmm. And I believe it's roughly about a half mile to the west.
Due west?
Yes, ma'am. On the north side of Cantrell.
Before you get to Ronald Road?
No, ma'am.
Beyond Ronald?
How large a development is Tully Cove? Do you know? Number of
No,
lots?
it's just a cul-de-sac. It's maybe 10, 12 lots. I think one of the gentlemen that lives there is here and might be able to answer it. But it's a relatively small development.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Mr. White, or welcome, Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Mayor Stodela and board members. I'm Ernie Peters with Peters Associates Engineers. Mr. White had asked me relative to this site to look at a few matters, and I want to share some information about the site that I think is important and relevant to the approval. Joe has touched on some of this relative to the site distance at the driveway that will serve the site. Site distance is good, even with people exceeding the posted 45-mile-an-hour speed limit. It's more than adequate to allow safe entry and egress from the site. The site will be served by a single driveway that will be 36 feet wide, allowing for a left turn and a right turn lane coming out of the site and a single lane entry into the site. Cantrell Road at this location is a 5-lane roadway with a center left turn lane that serves left turns in both directions. As Mr. White pointed out, the existing dog care facility or pet facility on the other side does not conflict with the location of this driveway, so there aren't turning movement conflicts that occur. The site is located in such a way that with the one access drive, the drive will provide circulation around the site and access to the parking within the site. The building itself is about 3,800 square feet. It's not large in terms of fast food restaurant size. A lot of fast food restaurants are 5,000 square feet. So this is small in the category of fast foods. One of the areas that Mr. White had asked me to look at was what the vehicle queuing capacity is on the site, because oftentimes that is one of the more important issues than even number of vehicles coming and going at a site. We did not have any reference or access to any Zaxby's specific site data prior to being asked to look at this. So we looked at two existing Zaxby sites, one in Maumelle and one in Bryant, and did actual observations and counts both during the noon peak hour and the PM peak hour as to what was occurring at those locations, so we could assess what the capacity for accommodating the queuing at the drive-through lane for this facility. What we found at those other two sites is that they are not Chick-fil-A's. They do not generate the volume and the queuing that that type restaurant does. The maximum number of vehicles queued at the Maumelle site was 7, and the Bryant site was 10. And we can accommodate 11 vehicles easily as the site is configured here, and that's vehicles from the pickup window back all the way through the site. There is the ability to alter the site in the future if it's needed, to add a second order board, which would facilitate the speed or the rate at which the vehicles can be accommodated. So I think that the site is designed well. It's located at an area of Cantrell Road that has good sight distance, has good ingress and egress, and should function quite well. I'd be glad to answer any particular questions relative to this site and our assessment of it.
Any questions? No. It doesn't appear that there are any at this point.
Mayor?
Thank you. Mr. Spivey, is there anyone else that you wish to speak on behalf of the applicant before we take cards?
I think that concludes our formal presentation. We do think there are maybe one or more cards here in favor, but that's probably.
I'll be happy to, we'll go to the cards and then I'll give you a chance to respond to anything that may come up. The first card I have is from Ken Harrison, who wishes to speak against the item.
Correct. Mayor and directors, I'm Ken Harrison. I live on Tully Cove, which is just west of this proposed development. I'm president of the Tully Cove Neighborhood Association. First, I want to say thank you to you for your service to we the people. I appreciate your service to the citizens of Little Rock and your interest in preserving and improving its integrity as a good place to live. Thank you for this opportunity to address this proposed fast food development. I'm here on behalf of our neighborhood to ask you to vote against this. We believe it will be harmful, is short-sighted, and will degrade this lovely part of our city. I feel like this is a David and Goliath situation. The developers of this fast food place has a lot of money behind it, enough to hire an expensive law firm and one of its expensive real estate attorneys as its spokesman, along with other paid professionals, to influence the passage of a destructive development. This is how they make their big money. On the other hand, we residents are at a disadvantage since we spend our time working hard, raising our families, being good citizens, paying our taxes, and building good neighborhoods by investing hard-earned money into our homes. For many of us, these homes we've invested in are our largest investment. I ask you to vote against this proposed fast food place for 3 reasons. The proposed development violates the city's land use plan. The land use plan says this land should be used for suburban office, not for the intense commercial use being proposed. This area currently has uses that fit nicely within the category of suburban office, such as a dentist office, a doctor's office, a bank branch. Another dentist office was just approved for the lot directly across Cantrell from this proposed fast food place. We welcome those good developments. That makes for a nice, orderly transition from the commercial node at Taylor Loop and into the residential areas. There's plenty of commercially zoned land available today, just a mile away at the next commercial area at the ranch. I'd be fine with this fast food place going in next to the Wendy's that's out there that already exists. That area makes good business sense due to the growing number of businesses in the ranch and the schools that are there. Second reason is the design overlay district for this area requires developments to fit within 2 acres or less. This proposed fast food place requires more than 2 acres, again, another violation. And thirdly, the city's good planning staff, these professionals have recommended this proposal be denied. We rely on their professional expertise, and to overrule them due to the power of influence of those looking for profit doesn't make sense for the long-term good of the city. Again, thank you for listening and considering the position of we the people. I ask that you vote against this development. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. The next card I have is from Don Pacifica.
Thank you, Mayor and Board of Directors. I'm Dawn Pacifica, and I too live on Tully Cove, and I'm here to ask you to vote against the Zaxby's. I do like Zaxby's. I like the food there, but I don't want it where it is proposed to be. Once again, we come to you, as we've come several times, about developments in that area, which is the scenic corridor. Now, if the scenic corridor is not going to be observed in the way that it's been designed, then there needs to be something that rescinds that, but it doesn't need to continue to be overpowered by putting in things that do not fit with the plan. So my question would be is, here it is, citizens have built their homes there because they believed in the scenic corridor. They believed in the plan. They believed that you would enforce the plan. It continues to get overridden by other people wanting to put in their businesses. Why do the businesses win over the people that have already invested there? So my question would be, if you do choose to go ahead and put the Zaxby's in, my question would be to tell me why. Because no one ever, the Planning Commission did not tell us why. They didn't tell us why they chose not to listen to the staff. They just did it. But no one tells the citizens that have already invested there why the plan is being overturned. So I ask you to not overturn the plan this time, to go ahead and stick with the plan. If you choose to change the plan, change it at a different time, then allow people to come in and start using the property how the new plan is intended. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pacifica. The next card I have is from Celia Martin.
Good evening. I'm Celia Martin, and I live in the Westchester neighborhood. I've been there for almost 30 years, and I've been before you many times. And I believe it was 2008 when I came the first time for the Burger King. And I said, Burger King, the area at that point was supposed to be suburban office. And Mr. Hawker-Smith came with a plan. The problem was that he didn't have the entire amount of the land wasn't available for him between Walgreens and where Burger King now sits. So he came and he offered Burger King and the land behind it, and you approved it. But at that point, I said to you, this will set a precedent. And several of you on this board were on the board at that time, and you said, oh no, we judge everything individually. Well, in the meantime, the other piece of land came available, and so we now have Kaufman by Design and All About Tires and Burger King. Regions is on the west. Its office, Dr. Cloud, and the other medical facility is a suburban office. They're there. Now, Zaxby's, and I'm not talking about Zaxby's. It's not about that in a specific. It is about the type of restaurant it is, type of business it is. It's not even a restaurant, the type of business. It is a high commercial use. It's a high volume. It is not a quiet office space. If you jump over the offices that are already there, the suburban offices that are already there, and you allow this come in, then the rest of that strip between it and Rummel Road, there was no stopping the commercial development. We all know that. I ask you to stop this. If I'm like those before me, it's not part of the Highway 10 scenic overlay design. If we need to change it, let's work together to change it. Let's not do it a piece at a time. I ask you to vote against this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Gray Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and members of the board, staff, gentlemen, and Bill. I'm going to give him a hard time. In making this decision, and they talked a lot about traffic and drainage and some of that stuff, which I think they should, because obviously that's in their favor. But I kind of went down a sequence of things and said, okay, and I've got some visuals that are going to be obvious to you. The first and most narrow question is, how does it fit within the design overlay district? Because that's a very specific thing, and the bottom line is, it doesn't. As Bill pointed out, it almost does, but it doesn't fit the design overlay. So if you back away from that and say, well, let's look at the zoning, but it doesn't match up with the zoning. There's 5 of these, just to let you know. So backed up a little further and said, well, let's see about the land use. Does it fit within the land use? Well, no, it doesn't fit that either. And so in some cases like that, you can say, well, if it's a good idea and it doesn't fit the design overlay and it doesn't fit the zoning and it doesn't fit the land use, the staff's going to figure that out and say, you know what, this is a good idea anyway. And then I look at the minutes from the Planning Commission meeting, which I was at anyway, and it says staff is not supportive of the applicant's request. I've had at least one member of this board tell me that they pretty much go along with what the staff says. So I'm counting on you. Not going to mention a name to put you on the spot. And then the 5th thing, if all those are against you, hey, if you can get neighborhood support, if all the neighbors around are saying, hey, even though it doesn't match all that stuff, can we make an exception for this? I would lean strongly towards that. The fact is, most of the neighbors that are not commercial, in fact, all the neighbors that are not commercial are here to say we oppose it. So along with the land use, the design overlay, sorry, I didn't do those in the right order, design overlay, land use, zoning, and staff, the neighborhood is opposed. So the other thing that I want to point out is a couple of us came up here Thursday to talk to the Planning Commission about a property that I'm going to show you how it fits in this. It was on the map earlier. Something like this right here, if I'm doing the graphics right. So we came to speak in favor of a commercial development that's going in that was mentioned earlier that's pretty much across the street. One of the arguments that we've heard at the Planning Commission and the board in the past is you can't get people to do the right things on those properties. You can't get those properties developed in that way. Well, I'm here to tell you 100 yards away, I measured it, there's a property that fits all of those things and has neighborhood support. Like I say, a couple of us showed up Thursday. Craig Berry was nice enough to come to me at the beginning of the Planning Commission meeting to tell me we don't accept comment if no one's opposed. So I did get to leave early, but we do want to support good development, and we just don't believe this one fits any of the criteria that it takes to approve. And so we really would appreciate each one of you opposing this development. Thank you.
The next card I have is from Lou Miotis. Lee Majors. There's no A on this card. There's no A on this card, Mr. Majors. Lou works, but Majors, that's how you...
I think that's probably it.
Are you a doctor?
No.
Oh, okay. No. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'm a resident of Taylor Loop, which is Gray's neighborhood. It's directly east of the Tully Cove. Thomas, thank you. I used to live on Taylor Loop, too. Anything I say would be redundant to what they said, but I do want to bring an example of a concern about the intended use being a heavier traffic than the proposed, the currently zoned office type of situation. Just down the road from it, you've got the little strip center with Senor Tequila and the other things in that development. Next to no traffic light, no secondary type of street serving that with that heavier traffic flow, and that's a disaster. It's very dangerous coming out of that for the people coming out, for the other people in the traffic. I see this as very similar type of scenario, and just wanted that to be a part of your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Majors. I have one card that wishes to speak in favor of this application. Mr. Wingfield, Keith Wingfield.
Thank you, Mayor Stodola, Vice Mayor Webb, and Mr. Carpenter, Mr. Moore, members of the Board of Directors. My name is Keith Wingfield. I am a builder and residential developer in Little Rock here. This is my normal uniform for the day. I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to go home and put a better dress on for you, so you can see how a builder actually spends his day. I'm here to speak in favor of this development. If you'll put that picture back up that shows it, I've got a subdivision that is within about 300 feet. My southeast corner of my property is within 300 feet of the northeast corner of this development. And you can see at the very upper portion of the screen a couple of cleared areas. Those are the part of the streets that we have. I considered this proposal very carefully. I believe it is appropriate, and I understand that that there was a plan put together 30 years ago, but it does need to be revisited. Until we do get it revisited, then I guess we're left with looking at each proposal on a case-by-case basis. I don't see any type of office that could possibly squeeze in to this site. It's just not suited for the type of office developments that are going. I actually had the privilege of building Dr. Cloud's home, and I know that he has a letter that he's right adjacent to this, and we've spoken about it, and he's not opposed to it. Of course, he's like everyone else. They just soon it'd be nothing, but that's not how development really goes. We have a substantial investment in our subdivision. It was about 20 acres. The completed value of that subdivision will be somewhere around $20 million worth of housing added to the city of Little Rock, and I hope that helps your coffers appropriately, not only with the sales tax we generate, but also with our property taxes. Immediately to the west is a 40-acre tract of land that is also due north of this Zaxby's and due west of our current subdivision. Our company has a right of first refusal on this property for 3 years, and it is our intention to try to reach an agreement with the owner to develop it into single-family housing. What will I do to help buffer our own development? I'll do exactly what I did on the first one. I created my own 50-foot wide natural green space buffer on the southern side of our property that buffers us from the commercial development. We view commercial development a little differently, I guess. You know, when we look at the properties up in the Hillcrest area and sometimes up in the Heights, we say, isn't it so nice that we can walk to a restaurant or walk to a shop? Well, that's what I see in what the future ought to be for our city and looking at some of these adjacent properties to residential. In fact, I have created a pedestrian, at my expense, I might add, a pedestrian and biking trail to the back of the Buffalo Wild Wings property. And it feeds into our subdivision. We hope to add some trails, walking trails, to the commercial development that has the Burger King and Kaufman. I'm not sure many of my folks would go to Burger King. I think more of them would go to Zaxby's, honestly. But I have a lot to lose as an investor in this development if I thought it would harm our property to the north. And I can assure you, I think it's very compatible. I'm sorry I have to take this position against some of my very good friends who spoke against this project, but I have to look at it as, and I'm not being paid anything by Mr. Landers, even though I have known him all my life. And I can tell you that when he says he's going to do something well, he does it extra well. Okay? So I'll be happy to answer any questions. And other than that, thank you again for your service.
Wait a minute, Mr. Wingfield. It looks like we have a couple of questions. Director Fortson, you're first, please.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Wingfield, I understand your development's 20 acres. Approximately what size homes are you planning on putting in there?
Those homes will probably average 2,500 to 2,800 square feet.
So how many will be in there?
50.
50. And the people exiting your development will get to Cantrell how?
They will get to Cantrell by going over a bridge that we constructed over the creek known as Isom or Ison Creek. And it goes on to Pinnacle Valley Road. And then the traffic then feeds on Pinnacle Valley Road up to the light at Cantrell.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Peck, you're recognized, please.
And this is not a question for Mr. Wingfield, but hello, Mr. Wingfield. And this is also confusing, and I think I broached the subject last week, asking how did the Burger King happen, and people just sort of looked nervously and laughed a little bit. So I agree with you, with Celia, with so many people. We need to revisit this. You know, staff is recommending denial. Planning Commission wants us to vote for it. The neighborhoods, not all, most of the neighborhoods are against it. It's just, I think this is going to continue and continue and continue until there's no more land in the Scenic Highway Den corridor. And I was talking to Lance about this a little earlier. The parcels that are left are so small. There's not much left. And is this going to happen every single time that somebody wants to develop in that area? I mean, I think it is. So, I mean, Bruce, I think we need to seriously revisit this and prevent this from happening again and again.
And Director Peck and Mayor, members of the board, obviously this whole discussion came up not too long ago, and it is my intent to try to develop a plan around how we revisit. But I think we also have to remember and times have changed, obviously, but there was a lot of work that went into the current plan. But I'll be coming back for you with some thoughts on that.
And the current plan, and you know, this is not a Ward 4 issue. I know this is your ward, Lance, but I'm very close. And being a resident of the corridor for 40 years, it's been a good plan. It's worked for the most part. I really think it has. This part of Highway 10 does not look like Rodney Parham. It's worked for the most part, but we're not finished, and I am fearful of what could happen. One thing, and I don't know if you could answer this or somebody could, I know that there was originally, back in May, a plan that was withdrawn that had a fast food restaurant and an office building. Is that correct? Am I wrong? Was there something?
I'm not aware of that.
2016. That was not this year. Okay, that was last year. And so different developers, somebody else?
No, I'm not aware of it.
No? Yeah, I saw it in the notes, and that was before my time, so I just wondered how in the world an office and a fast food restaurant was going to fit there, and it was withdrawn, I think. Is this right, Jamie, in May? But this is a different group that has come back.
It may have included multiple parcels, which is really the solution to the under 2 acre thing, is you buy 2 parcels and put them together.
I see.
It doesn't make the zoning and the land use and all that.
Okay. Thank you.
Director Peck, if
Yes,
I
sir.
could comment about the plan.
Sure.
You're exactly right. And I'll also add to that, the plan has worked well. In fact, if you look at the buffers that have been, the berms, and the additional landscaping, the deeper setbacks, the wider, the landscaping for all the new development out there over the last 20 years, it's very nice. And it is not what many of the residents feared, which was another Rodney Parham. It's not that at all. In fact, the only places you see that were places that were already in existence before the plan was brought into effect. So it's worked well, but anything that is 30 years old, needs to be revisited and make sure we're in the right direction. In my opinion, and it's worth 2 cents maybe. I think I told you that. I give you 2 cents worth. I don't see any of those sites all the way to Rummel being suitable for office. They're just not, they're just too small. So a small restaurant, single use, like this one's done, I don't see it harming neighborhoods. I just don't see that. So, my opinion. So.
We can't.
Go.
All right, thank you. Director Hendricks, you're recognized, please.
I want the gentleman to come back to the mic. I know him. I know of him.
Ma'am.
I'm concerned that you're suggesting that we disregard staff's recommendation.
Oh, ma'am.
Who has been hired by this city with my dollars and yours.
Yeah, and I understand that's a very good point, and I agree with that. However, 9 of the only planning commissioners that were present at the planning commission meeting, all of them voted in favor of this project.
Mm-hmm.
So,
no, but I'm talking to you.
I'm just saying that they looked at it just like I'm looking at it. I believe I look at each one on an individual basis, and in my opinion, I would have, if I'd been a planning director, I would have voted for it too. 9 of them did. So, and they went against the staff, and that's not normal, but they must have seen something that gave them reason to believe it's okay.
You're talking about the planning commission?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, they're thinking about being reappointed, like some of us up here thinking about being reelected. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Wingfield.
You're welcome.
All right, that completes the cards. Are there, call him Mr. Spivey, and then I've got a question for staff. There may be others, but go ahead, Mr. Spivey.
Thank you, Mayor Stodler. First, let me say I wish I was as clever as some of my friends. I don't have any repartee or jokes to make about some of my friends from the neighborhood, but I appreciate the opportunities, and other than my personal appearance, that's about all I can offer. There are a lot of things that we could talk about, and I'm not going to belabor this, except to say that I've said many times in front of the Planning Commission and this board that, in my opinion, the Design Overlay District has been a huge success on Highway 10. And I think this board should take pride in the fact that you and your predecessors have, I think, overwhelmingly supported the design standards in the Design Overlay District for the past 30 years. This application complies with those standards. A statement was made that it violates the zoning. It really doesn't. This is R2 property. We're asking you to reconsider that and to consider at that location a use which admittedly is not consistent with the underlying land use plan. If you look at the overhead view above, and I think Mr. Wingfield highlighted this, I would describe this as a de facto mixed-use area. I think Mrs. Martin made a very good point. She said she was told in 2008 that the Burger King did not constitute a precedent. I don't think we've said anything in the presentation we made in the Planning Commission or here that because Burger King's there, you ought to do this. What I think Ms. Martin told you was that she was told that each individual application would be considered on its merits. And that's why we've presented this to you tonight. you'll have to accept the fact I'm not cynical enough to say that if someone pays me enough, I'll represent them. I look at something and I decide whether or not an application makes sense at a location and for a purpose. And when I looked at this made sense to me at this location. I think Mr. Wingfield also said that this area down to Rummel Road, which is a natural dividing point, makes sense. Although I don't think he said a mixed-use area, I would say that it makes sense as a mixed-use area, a de facto mixed-use area. So perhaps, as Director Peck has suggested, this is one area that could be restudied. But for all of the reasons that the design overlay district has made sense, this particular use at this location makes sense, and it complies with the design overlay district. It makes sense. The other thing is, and we haven't really spoken about this, the Zaxby folks want to be a good neighbor. They close at 10 p.m., which is earlier than many of the other businesses in this area. They have indicated that they're happy to lower their lights at 10 p.m. so as not to be intrusive. They've indicated that they're willing to put a double stack in, as Mr. Peters indicated earlier, to avoid traffic queuing up out into Cantrell Road. They want to make this work. We've indicated, we being the applicant, that they've prepared to buffer as necessary the back of the property. I had not spoken at length to Mr. Wingfield before tonight. I listened to him carefully. I understand where he's coming from. It makes sense to me. The fact that he's built in a buffer, which, as you know, many residential developers do not, simply suggests that he's looking ahead and planning in such a way as to make that residential use compatible. Now, no one said to me, although this has been called degrading, it's been called a lot of things tonight, but no one's ever explained to me how a restaurant, be it a fast food or drive-through, is inherently inconsistent with a residential neighborhood. My first home was in Hillcrest. We enjoyed walking 2 or 3 blocks down to Kavanaugh for a meal. I was 5 blocks away from church. All right, this is not Hillcrest, but there's no reason why the vicinity can't have some of those attributes. There's no reason why at this location this use can't make sense. So I think what I would say to you tonight is that I don't want to argue with the good folks in Tully Cove or any of the other subdivisions. I understand where they're coming from, I understand, but this is a plan. It's a plan that has evolved over 30 years. And perhaps, and we think it is, or we wouldn't be here tonight, this makes good sense as a further evolution of that plan at this location. It's not a precedent for anything else. It only applies to this site, this location. We would respectfully request that you consider this an appropriate use, that you vote in favor of the application, allow them to go forward, construct a business at that site, which will be a good community member, a good neighbor. We would thank you for your vote and your consideration this evening. We're available to answer any other questions any of the board members may have. Thank you.
Director Hendricks, you're recognized, please.
I need him to come back.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
I wanted to ask you if you have talked with Mr. Jamie and the staff at the Planning Commission.
It is my pleasure to speak to them almost on a weekly basis.
I mean, with not just you, how many other persons, I believe, that have met with him from the firm or whomever is for this project?
I'm not sure I understand your question,
Were
Director
you the
Hendricks.
only person that met with Mr. Jamie, with the Planning Commission staff?
Well, you mean at the Planning Commission meeting?
No. Planning Department, who said denial. Are you understanding me?
Somewhat, yes, ma'am. I have had.
Not the Planning Commission.
No, I understand. I
Okay.
understand. I have had conversations, although not, they've been, and.
I'm talking about bodily meetings, not telephone.
Have I gone over there and sat down with him and talked about this? I've talked with him on the phone.
Sometimes it helps.
It does help. It does help. And yet, I think we understood early on that because this use did not comply with the land use plan, that the staff was constrained to do anything other than oppose it. Now, I'm not putting words in Jamie's mouth. He can speak for himself.
Well, hold a minute, I want to ask Mr. Moore, what is he talking about? See, I talk plain English.
I think what Mr. Spivey is saying, when an item comes before our staff, and obviously it's reviewed in a lot of different aspects, not only planning, but public works. If for some reason, it's not consistent with the plan that, is on the book, so to speak, then they try to be consistent. Not to say that they haven't recommended changes to the plan over the course of the year. So I think he's just saying that early on, he realized, or the applicant realized that staff was going to be supportive of the plan that's currently on the books.
Is that what you assumed?
No, I didn't assume anything. No, we talked with them. We certainly asked for their support.
Would you be willing, if this board say, to meet again with staff?
Well,
Sometimes it changes, sometimes.
I would be.
Remiss?
No, not remiss. No, I'm certainly always happy to visit with the staff. However, it is my opinion, and again, Mr. Collins can speak for himself, that the staff's position in this has been consistent throughout, and they've consistently recommended denial.
You're talking about city staff?
Yes, ma'am.
I've seen a few changes up here.
Well, I have too. But I think
What I'm
we went through the process with the staff and the subdivision committee and with the planning commission. And the staff's position, and we appreciate, understand it, we respect it, has been consistent throughout, and they have been opposed to this application because of the land use plan. They have acknowledged that that this application complies with the design overlay district standards.
Okay, well, I'm asking you that because I think it would help. I don't know whether Bruce would feel about it or what Tom is frowning up over there. I don't know what his problem is. But what I was really wanting to know, are you willing to do that? Because I usually support staff.
Oh, I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand that. And
I would love to see you all go back and see what Jamie can do for you. And even if it takes a little more time, so what? Think about it, because you know I'm going to vote with staff.
I understand that. And I respect.
I don't think we should be paying him if he's not doing his job, but I understand too that there needs to be some kind of change in the future. Is that right, Mr. Moore? With the system as it is?
I think that what we're all saying is that a plan was adopted 30 years ago. A lot of things have changed.
Yeah.
Should we go back? But I also think, that the plan has served the city well. I think that's important to acknowledge. And so I think we're going to look at a process, but we don't have any recommended changes at this point.
Well, maybe we need to look at the planning commission. I want to see why Tom's frowning. What's your problem?
Director Hendricks, if you had asked another time if they were willing to go back, I was going to step in and say that I see nothing wrong with suggesting to any applicant that might be a way to do so. But when it's repeatedly asked, it starts becoming the type of thing that makes it sound as if the applicant's action isn't voluntary, and that calls into question the board's action and should be avoided.
Avoid it going back to the planning department?
Avoiding asking the applicant to go back. Mr. Spivey had said they were not interested in.
Yeah, but sometimes you can change folks' minds.
I know,
with
but
prayer.
if a government changes somebody's mind, then it's looked as overreaching, in which case that makes the decision not upon whether this can be compatible with the land use, but whether one party or another party has the power.
Okay, well, I've been brave enough to speak my, thank you.
Thank you.
I fear no man, just God.
Director Hines, you're recognized, please.
Thank you. I think I probably got a question for Ernie Peters. Ernie, I know we had this conversation back when the Murphy USA came up. So in order of magnitude with the drive-through fast food, as far as trip generator, how much of it works from local traffic that's already there versus, you know, being a destination? I know that was one of the big issues when we talked about the Murphy. It was really more the traffic that exists, so.
Yeah. Fast foods typically pull about 40 to 42% of their traffic from the existing traffic stream on the adjacent street. Okay. And everyone knows there's a lot out there to pull from, so this is, I mean, this type use likes to be on arterial streets because of that reason.
And why would this location be more attractive than, say, a mile down the road? I mean, for a business as far as traffic flow, that kind of stuff.
I don't know that it would be better or worse a mile down the road, and I assume you mean to the west.
To the west, yeah. Not to the east. We got plenty there.
When I look at Cantrell Road, a mile to the west, it's the same. It's 5-lane arterial street, same as what it is here. It's relatively straight and flat, so sight distance would be the same at that location. There might be some synergy there at the intersection with Taylor Loop that would make this location more attractive to patrons that would want to go to this type commercial use. But there's going to be more development to the west in the future, but there'll probably be other applicants that'll want to build down there.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Just to share my thoughts with everyone, there's been lots of talk about violations and not following the plan. I think the design overlay district is just that, a plan. And if you look at the language when we deal with a property, it sets up a process. And like making sausage processes aren't always easy. And I know that having talked with Ken and Dawn and Gray and the Coxes and Celia, this seems to be a never-ending show. I think the only thing we've got to look forward to is at some point we'll have full development and we won't have to be coming down here, but that may outlast all of us. I think the true nature is looking at each application on its own merit. I think with Dr. Spann buying the property to the west, that I think hopefully if that fully develops that corridor, then we don't have a question. I haven't visited with him lately, but I think the big issue is the thing that I find interesting is that since I've been on the board, we've adopted complete streets, try to focus on making our community more walkable. And what I see in the design overlay district in a plan is this linear development pattern that starts with a heavy commercial node and ventures out, but the distances between the commercial nodes when it comes to residential don't make it very feasible to get a walkable community. But I think with what Mr. Wingfield's doing with his developments, trying to connect them to some of the stuff on the north side of this roadway makes sense. And I think going back to what you were talking about, I think the proposal that was on there, and you talk about orders of magnitude with a fast food and another office building, I think that presents another issue that if you thought fast food was too dense, that if you had an office to that same property for 1.5 acres, that makes that development even denser. This on order of magnitude to me is not, I think if it was a Chick-fil-A, we'd be having an entirely different discussion. But I think that probably ends up further west. But I think it seems reasonable on its face, and I think taking each one as it comes is what we'll have to continue to do until we have a broader discussion on how we look at either possibly changing or amending the plan to make it so we're not all down here at loggerheads every time somebody wants to develop a piece of property that's under 2 acres, which I think once we get the report from Bruce, we'll see there's going to be a lot of that. But thank you.
I've got a couple of questions for staff, if I could.
Collins.
I'll get my chance in here. Okay. Jamie, if you would, I think I was around as a city attorney back when the design overlay district was put in and the Highway 10 land use plan, and I think there's a distinction between the two, which I think the applicant tried to identify, that the land use plan is one thing. Plans are designed as an idea of what's going to happen in the future, but they do change, don't they?
That's correct, Mayor.
The statute suggests that they can be changed, correct?
That's correct, and I'm glad you brought that up. I was hoping to make this, statement on there is there is a separation, and I think we've mingled the terms several times, in talking about the design overlay district and the land use plan. The design overlay district is what gets you that scenic corridor, that setback, from there. And that is tied to that acreage. It's that minimum acreage was because with everything that was happening on Rodney Perelman, that growth, and that you wanted to have some type of setback. Well, when you have small sites, when you have a 40-foot front setback on the landscaping, you're cutting down a lot of the acreage. And so there had to be a minimum set of what you think you could do a development and get that sprawl look that you're looking for in the corridor. And that's when they set that minimum so that if anything is less than that 2 acres, it would come before the city board for approval to look at that because it doesn't comply with the design overlay district. But that is separate from the land use. The land use works independently of the design overlay district. It is to set, development throughout that corridor from not necessarily high-intensity commercial for the whole corridor. Because any developer, if you look at a property, they're wanting to get, their highest and best use for the property. I mean, they have a right to develop their property. But if you can imagine if every property along the corridor was done commercial, what trips we generated and what you would see even within that setback of use. It would be all retail and commercial. They want to get the highest and best use. But you also want to intermix it with other use that serves the citizens of Little Rock so they don't have to drive miles and miles to go to office use or a dentist or other type of commercial use or an office use. And so that when we did the land use plan back in the day, and we continue to do it, I mean, we're about to bring it before the board every so often. Last year we brought another section to you, and we're going to bring this section to you in the coming first quarter of 2018. We look at how development is going and see if we need to revise some of that. The reason that we requested, denial of this is because of the land use plan. And we do try to be consistent, in covering that so we do not get spot development, happen where, and that's why I was presenting last Tuesday was the jumping from commercial to office, back to commercial, back to office. You do want to try to bring those together in a sense so that people will come and shop at certain areas. We'll also have, office in certain areas. And there is going to be some intermixing of the two, which you've seen just to the east of this development. There has been mixing of the two when it was originally set to office. Well, that's where we as staff do our job in review of the land use plan and reviewing of what development is happening and present it to the planning commission and the board for decision. And they did comply with design overlay district except for the acreage. And I've explained the acreage, why that was set, the minimum. And that's why it's before you today. And so it was just the change in the land use. We just felt like that jumping from commercial to office to commercial, then back to office, we would like to see that stay as office.
This property, I remember when that plan was done, discussed this property or this particular property as transition. Is that correct? Was it transition?
It was suburban
Transitional zone?
office.
What?
It was suburban office.
Suburban office, not transition?
Not transitional.
Okay.
We've worked over the years to reduce and eliminate the transitional as this has grown and has been developed out.
Well, didn't transitional zone, though, presume there was going to be mixed use?
It's mixed use.
Okay, so I guess that was my point. Mixed use would mean office, commercial.
Office, commercial, yeah,
that kind of multifamily. What, you mentioned that they comply with the design overlay district, and I remember when the Burger King came in, there was a lot of discussion about not only the setback, but also the use of berms as a way to help to screen vehicles, and I think we had certain kinds of requirements dealing with monument signs. Can you elaborate a little bit on their compliance with the design overlay district on some of those scenic corridor issues that we've been kind of just globally talking about as being complied with?
Yeah, all of those, the buffers that, for the design overlay district, they have agreed to comply with. If, all the berms that you're talking about and the landscaping, they present schematic, and then they agreed to adhere to all of the design guidelines for that. And also the screening there's other screening like the menu board, will have a 6-foot screening wall that they agreed to comply with internal to their site.
Well, those answer my questions. Thank you. Director Campiris, you're next, please.
Two questions. The first to Tom. Mr. Spivey, Jamie, don't run off. Mr. Spivey offered or said there were things that if this goes in, the people were inclined to do. Is that with the lighting and things like that? Are those things that you're willing to put into this application?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that is, can you reiterate those?
Sure. Originally, there was a mistake in the staff write-up as to the hours of operation, which we brought to their attention. The actual hours of operation are about 10 to 10, if I remember correct. And I think that's been corrected. I think that got corrected in the staff write-up. 10 p.m. is earlier than some of the nearby businesses. When we met, or following the meeting with the neighborhood, one of the questions was, what are the hours of operation, lighting? And when talking with the Zaxby's folks, they were happy to say that at 10 p.m. we'll lower the lights. You heard Mr. Peters' presentation on traffic. This does not provide for a double stack line as some fast food restaurants, some of you may be familiar with around town, which, and I'm not an expert on this, but in my personal opinion, probably are more intense fast food operations. At present, based upon the observations Mr. Peterson has made of other Zaxby's, it does not appear that a double stack is necessary, but if it becomes necessary in time, they're willing to do that. So those are not things that we object to. I think in some of the discussions with Mr. Wingfield, although his development doesn't, as he pointed out, come all the way over, we're certainly happy to buffer at the back. We didn't know about his own internal 50-foot buffer, but clearly we're not, I think the comment was made that Dr. Cloud certainly has issued a letter of endorsement, as has Dr. Spann to the west. I think Dr. Cloud's comment was, I just don't want to have to look out on something different. Well, we obviously have told him we'll be happy to landscape, so he doesn't have to. So the intent here is to be a good neighbor. And the intent here is to go the extra mile on those items. Now, there may be some other things, but those are ones that have come up and for which we've had specific responses. Am I forgetting anything? Yeah. I think those are the things.
Well,
Obviously,
I just wanted to make sure that those were codifiable. Is that right, Tom? Okay.
I'm not quite sure what lowered means for lights.
well, it means lowered, and I'm not sure either, but we're willing to lower the lights. And I don't think it means lower them to the ground. It means turn them down.
You did much better than I did in college, but
Thank you,
dim, just
dim,
what I
thank
was
you.
looking at,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
This is happening to me more and more frequently as I've gotten older. Dim is a much better word. Thank you. See, there I am, funny.
And then the second one is to Jamie. Jamie, if this project goes in, could you explain to me what happens if it fails? What sort of right a next person would have to use it for another opportunity?
Well, currently their application is for planned development commercial. And so it is a zoning on top, overlying on top of a zoning. So when somebody comes in, if this one doesn't go and it fails, if they propose the same type of development with essentially the same layout, the same building use, then it would go. But odds are, if it is a specific restaurant establishment with a specific footprint, it would not meet that requirement. It has to be substantially compliant with the application that's in front of you.
So they would have to come back to you and start over again.
That's correct.
I think that obviously we're not picking on Chick-fil-A tonight, but if Chick-fil-A were to go in there, that would certainly alter the situation.
It would alter it, and it's based upon, like I said, the footprint and the use and the traffic generation, the site, how they lay their site out. I mean, it would have to be substantially compliant, and usually with fast food chains, they do not look the same exactly.
Thank you.
Director Hendricks, you're recognized, please.
Jamie, come in. The only thing I think I'm really paid back on what Dean has just said, and I think I mentioned it earlier. How long, maybe Bruce or Tom may be able to answer this, with the change that's been mentioned, how long would it take for this to happen in order that they would be eligible to come back later and make application for what they're trying to do? Am I making sense?
If it was denied at this board, to come back and make another application, is that the question you're asking?
No, I hope, no. What I'm asking you, I think Mr. Moore mentioned something about something else that the staff has to do. Tom just bowed his head.
Okay. If you're talking about
How long does that take?
looking at the corridor and the land use, that would take somewhere around 3 months, 4 months to kind of go drive it, look at it, because there's a lot of properties. We pulled some stuff digitally off of our GIS data just to start, because this has, we've had several things come through in this area to kind of see how much has been developed out there. And just for everybody's knowledge, we are sitting at around 43% of the corridor, design overlay corridor, has been developed. Now, that does include some extraterritorial boundaries. So we still have a ways to go on finishing out this corridor, and I do agree with everybody. Mr. Spivey spoke about it, that if you just drive and look, the difference between the Design Overlay District, Cantrell, and Rodney Parham, there's a huge difference. I think it has been a success, and through this, and I think the development through the area has been a success. I just think that before we need to, and I agree that we need to revisit and look at the land use, and we do that, constantly throughout the city, and to get people involved of what this development has happened over time through that area. Because some of these nodes has changed over time, and when we revisit that overlay district and we revisit the land use plan, we can take all that into consideration.
But again, I like what Mr. Spivey has said, but I don't know, I hope he's not being stubborn, but you said 3 months. Is that what you said? It would take 3 months for whatever this is that's in the way. What do you want to say, Bruce?
It would take at least,
I'm not going to let y'all get away with this.
Well, I mean,
I'm for the fast food, but
that's at a minimum. I think it'd take a little longer because again, the plans have been in place. It's it's 43% developed. That means the balance of it's not, and so it. I think that was very optimistic. But he's a new department director, and I like that in him. But it would, because it'd be a lot of community input, neighborhood input, business community.
Well, I know that they want the business, and I think we know that young fast food is really on the up and up. People don't like to cook anymore, and I saw the lady frown. I'm only voting with staff at this point. I hope she understands that. She keeps giving me an eyeball, but I give it back to her. Is that I'm voting with staff because I'm being redundant. I paid that staff. I help to pay the staff. She helps to pay the staff. And by the way, I have a master's degree from St. Louis University in urban planning and development.
Master's degree. Director Capiers, did you have a follow-up on that?
Well, just one more question for Jamie, because this may lead to something later on. to go back to Cappy's idea, are there, just off the top of your head, how many rezoning or processes in the corridor that are in the queue already that you know about?
Currently, we know about it was only one in the corridor that's going through the process right now, other than this one.
Well, this may be a time for Cappy to talk about stopping everything for a period of time, except for that one application. And
Jamie, can I ask you one more question? You mentioned that you believe that obviously this is greatly distinguished from Rodney Parham Road, and said that it's largely a success. Would you attribute that success largely to the compliance with the design overlay district, specifically those issues?
It has been compliance with the overlay district. Design overlay district has also been compliant with the land use plan in general. Yes, there's been some changes on the land use plan and uses that's went in, adopted by the board. But that setback, that 40-foot
Those are designed.
landscape buffer, that's all part of the design overlay district.
It's not so much the use as it is the
Not
design.
so much the use. If you go through there, there's different types of uses through the corridor, but that setback is still there. That green space is still there.
Thank you. Director Richardson, you're next, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This may be for Bruce or Jamie. I think, Bruce, your comments about additional support is a perfect segue for my question. Do we have on file any records or any letters of support from adjacent property owners in that area for this application? I mean, we certainly heard from people, we've heard from people who are speaking in opposition of it, but do we have any letters or any comments or any support from adjacent property owners in that area?
We had 2 letters of support come in, and that was mentioned previously also by the applicant. One of them is from Cloud Family Dentistry.
Yes, sir.
That was over there, and they're just to the west of it, or east of it. And then Little Plastic Surgery, which was part of a planned office development that the board approved, and they are just to the west of it.
Did you say Little Plastic Surgery?
Little Plastic Surgery.
Is that little in the amount or size? Can you quantify the little for me?
Not known.
I'm sorry, Mayor. It was a Little Rock. Okay, 'cause I don't know if that was the amount or the size. I'm trying. We're gonna quantify that.
Oh yeah. Well, the header just says Little. Right
Okay,
there.
we have
The
Little
rock
Rock. All
is
right.
not off the header.
All right. Thank you.
Director Hines, you're recognized, please.
Thanks. One other quick question, I guess, for Bill or somebody. So we're really focused on the drive-through business, and the Zaxby's I've been to tend to seem to me a little more sit-down, like David's Burgers and that kind of stuff. So am I off base, or is that, we focus on all the drive-through generated traffic, but how many people are coming to do more of the fast casual, sit down and eat?
Well, let me address that question this way. And Joe, back me up on this because I'm not quite sure, but I think the design overlay district for this property requires a minimum of 38 parking spaces. And I think this site provides for 44 parking spaces. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Nevertheless, there is ample parking to take advantage of the sit-down feature. And again, I'm not a student of fast food restaurants, and I hope my wife's not watching, but I have been to a Zaxby's or two. And I would say that certainly the amenities are intended to attract people to come in, family dining. And I would think that it's fair to say, given, if you look at Mr. Peters' numbers, it's fair to say there's a combination of sit-down and drive-through, but less, perhaps in proportion to some competitors, less drive-through.
Okay, thank you.
Director Fortson, you're recognized.
There are 44 spaces. Thank you.
Mr. Peters.
Yes, Director Fortson.
In your opinion, how many trips per day would a 50-home subdivision generate?
About 500.
And I'm not in any way being critical of Mr. Wingfield's division. I've seen his developments, and they're very positive, and I encourage that addition. So often, when we have applications along the Cantrell Road area, the design overlay district comes up, and there's a lot of discussion about a lot of the elements of it, but so often, one of the bottom lines expressed from opposition is the amount of traffic generated. And concurrent with that, the desire to see residential developed out Highway 10. The only point I'm making, I think you would agree with me as an expert, that Cantrell is a rather busy road now.
I would agree with that. Yes, yes, sir.
With ultimate development, if it's all residential from where they're proposing to put Zaxby's all the way out to the Bank of Ozarks development, or if it's mixed use, we can say traffic's going to be increased. And from what you told us earlier about the traffic generated out of a business that is going to depend nearly half on local business, I think we don't need to leave here with the idea that if we built all homes out there, traffic would not be a problem.
Well, as you've inquired, residential generates traffic volume just like commercial or office or multifamily does, but the magnitude of that is different. On an acre and a half, it might, and Mr. Wingfield might answer this question better than I, but on an acre and a half, you might be able to build 4 or 5 homes. And at 10 trips per home per day, that's not much traffic. So clearly, commercial generates more than residential. But even if it all developed as residential, as you suggest might be some fantasy option, those folks are going to go somewhere to go eat and go to their office and to go to other commercial uses. So it's not going to make traffic go away.
Thank you.
Director Hendricks, you're recognized, please.
Thank you. I don't know how much longer we'll go with this, but I want to let you know I will be asking for a roll call in case you did not hear me.
Director Richardson, you're recognized, please.
Yes, Mayor. I don't know if this has been mentioned or not, and if so, I apologize. Have we talked about the size of this restaurant, and have we talked about the seating capacity at all? My memory is not as good as I remember it used to be.
Director Richardson,
Yes, sir.
It's 3,800 square feet.
And the seating capacity?
Great question. I don't know that I have that number.
So, I mean, I guess as
Go ahead.
as people with business acumen, we could certainly have some kind of expectations of average amount of customers there to make it profitable for us. So is there any kind of estimation or guesstimation about what we're looking at in terms of number of sit-down customers? Does that make sense?
I don't know. Ernie, have you got a?
Well, let me say 2 things that have been mentioned. First of all, I think Mr. Peters indicated that as fast food restaurants go, this is smaller
Yes, sir.
than some other types of fast food restaurants, and therefore, from a volume standpoint, it's not probably as intense as others. Also, I think the city's own requirements with respect to parking give us some expectation
Gotcha.
as to what the capacity is. I'm sorry, we don't have the exact number.
Well, that may not be a fair question, but 3,800 square feet is going to be the anticipated size.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you,
And
sir.
that's in the application.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You bet.
Director Peck, you're recognized, please.
Yes, and this is my last comment, I promise. Just wanted to clarify, I'm not suggesting a moratorium on development on Highway 10. It's inevitable. I think it's worked so far. I just think it would behoove all of us if we revisited this, and I'm glad that we're going to. And I think, so there's about 57% or 43%, I'm not sure what the number is, of parcels left. Is that right, Mr. Spivey?
Well, I don't want to contradict Mr. Collins. However, I happen to have a copy of Jamie, I want to have a copy of an email from Mr. Brian Minyard in response to a request made by Craig Berry, who is the chairman of the Planning Commission. And he has divided the corridor into categories. At present, developed parcels are 207.78, which is 55.12% of the parcels have been developed. Another undeveloped parcels with an active PZD, which I think that means there's already an approved use for that, constitutes another 12.5%. The undeveloped parcels with straight commercial zoning is about 20%. And then there are parcels that are nearby but not within the 300-foot corridor that constitute another 12%. So we can infer different things from this, but I think if you take the 55 plus the 12 that's already approved and the straight commercial zoning, you end up with a substantial number here that is approximately 87% for which there are already uses. Now, that may be, that's one way of looking at it, but this came from the Planning Department, and it was in response to a request from the Planning Commission. I do think, and this is something that sort of everybody, certainly on the board, recognizes, a significant amount of, shall we say, inventory has been sort of taken out recently, and therefore, with respect to available property, there's just less.
Director Wright, you're recognized, please.
May we please call the question? Thank you.
There's a motion and a second to call the question. All in favor
Mayor,
of calling the,
there's a question on the floor. Director Compuris raised 4 issues. Did he want them added as conditions to the ordinance? Because that motion hasn't been made. There were 4 conditions that Director Compuris talked about. One is the 10 to 10 hours of operation. One is light dimming at 10 p.m. One is going to the double stacking if that becomes necessary. And the 4th one is placing a buffer in the back if necessary for the residential property back there.
Stated in that way, I don't think we have any objection.
well, that would be your request. That would have to be the applicant's request.
Well, we certainly have made these statements to the neighborhood. We didn't make them, whimsically. We intended to do them, and certainly they were in response to issues that were raised, and we're prepared to do that. I think stated the way they're stated, the stacking and the buffering, of course, is as necessary and requested. Dimming is something we'll have to work out, but I think there's standards that the city has that we can work within. Sorry, I've forgotten the last one.
Hours of operation. 10
Hours
to
of
10.
operation is already, but that was actually something that we corrected in the minutes already.
Mr. Carpenter, does that comply with your request? Is there a motion?
My understanding, the motion is to amend the ordinance to add those as conditions.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Can you do that without me withdrawing my motion?
I'm just trying to get people through it.
I'm gonna go to the bathroom in a minute, and y'all
Well,
can
if
vote
you'll-
on your own. Just forget me. I mean,
Director Hendricks?
I can't do it.
I wanted to ask you, with this motion, if passed, take precedent over staff?
Well, it's just an amendment to the application which further defines those specific issues. The staff's recommendation has not changed.
Tom, as attorney, is that still subject to denial of staff? Bruce, you shaking your head, yes? I ain't voting for that.
If the thing is amended, then you still have to vote on whether or not to approve the rezoning. This is just to make those conditions a part of what you vote on.
Okay, I want to understand what I'm doing. With Dean's motion, and
Right.
he gets a second, if it passes, what happens?
Then the ordinance would have those conditions in it. And so then when you vote for the ordinance, the question is whether
As
you want to have the rezoning with those stricter conditions, or do you want to have the rezoning without those stricter conditions?
Okay.
All in favor of the motion to amend indicate by saying aye. Opposed, say nay.
I'm
All right,
present.
the ordinance and the ordinance has been amended to add those conditions.
I would like a
We
roll
can now
call.
vote on, the question's been called, which is an immediate consideration. I gave a little tolerance to get that clear. And it's been seconded. All in favor of calling the question indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Question's been called, which means a vote immediately.
Can you get a roll call on that? No, I only
All
said-
in favor,
You-
all in favor of the passage of the ordinance as amended indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Roll
Opposed, say
call.
nay.
Roll call.
Roll call's been requested. Madam Clerk?
People get away with sitting up here. Put 'em on front.
Director Peck,
Just-
Nay.
Director Hines,
Yes.
Director Wright,
No.
Director Wyrick,
Yes.
Director Campuris, Director Fortson,
Yes.
Director Adcock,
No.
Director Hendricks,
Present. And I'm not going to.
Director Richardson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Webb.
Yes.
Director Hendricks, would you like to change your vote?
Present.
Did you vote present?
Yes.
6-3-1.
6-3-1.
Vote of 6-3, the ordinance amended has passed.
I've got 5-4.
That's 6.
I don't know how you could tell. I could only hear what he said.
Just count.
Hines, Wyrick, Campuris,
Richardson.
Fortson,
I counted them.
I've got an R there.
I've got
Clerk.
Richardson, Hines, Wyrick, Campuris, Fortson, and Vice Mayor Webb. That's 6.
Thank you very much. The ordinance is passed as amended. Okay, we now have our next item on the agenda, which is discussion, if any, on the 2018 proposed budget. Mr. Moore, I believe our intention is to hand out the budget. And certainly, we won't, if you would like to discuss specific items tonight, we're certainly happy to do that. I think the intent is that we would recess this meeting to the 12th for further discussion about the budget after you have a chance to review it.
Correct, and if there were any questions from the previous presentations or anything that we needed to follow up on.
Mayor,
there-
could you turn all these lights on?
Sorry. Go ahead, Director Hendricks. You're recognized.
No, I was just suggesting that you turn all these lights off in case somebody wanted to do something.
I had them on for the
Yeah.
vote, the roll call vote.
What is it?
Director Hendricks, you're recognized.
What are we dealing with? I was talking to Dean. What is this? What are we fixing to discuss now? Or I
There
have
doesn't
some-
necessarily have to be any discussion. I'm asking if there is any discussion about the budget. This is the ordinance
Yes,
with the
yes,
proposed 2018 budget.
yes.
We've had conversation about it before. We're having public hearings on it.
Well, my question is for Mr. Moore.
All right, go ahead, please.
Mr. Moore, I wanted to ask you, in this budget anywhere, is there an increase in salary for the people at the lower level, such as, and I'm talking about housing, and I'm talking about public works. And most of these people are black, they're poor, they're underpaid. Will anybody get a raise?
There are raises in the budget.
Give me an hourly
not
raise.
just, excuse me,
Hourly raise,
I don't know, ma'am.
an hourly raise for an individual.
What we do is percentage raises, and so there are percentage raises in the budget for all of our employees.
How much per hour for
It-
the garbage truck people, who are mostly black?
Again, we're still negotiating. I'm going to have additional conversations with them. As you know, I would also say, and I'm not going to say whether they're black or white, but
They are black, most of them.
okay.
Come on.
Is
see 'em
the
every
city implemented a step and grade policy program for our ASME union, which is mainly made up of our solid waste and our street employees. That went in this year. On average, most of them saw about a 2% raise.
Is that $10 an hour? or
Compared to, it depends on what you make, compared to all other employees, they got a 1.5% increase. But also going forward in 2018, on their anniversary day, whatever across-the-board raise they get January 1st on their anniversary date, they're going to get a 1.8% increase. So that's what's been implemented with our ASME employees.
And Mr. Moore, the reason why I ask you, well, maybe others do, but I communicate with Ward 1 people all the time. Churches, grocery stores, wherever. Sometimes I can hardly shop for people crying on my shoulder that they're not being paid enough. Is there a law against reducing some of these people that's getting high salaries and not doing a darn thing? I think you know who I'm talking about. I can name some names for you, but I'm not going to do that.
Okay.
Okay? So unless you can send me what these young men are making per hour, you can send it to me personally. I just can't afford to vote for your budget. You got a lot of, I can just show you a whole lot of folks sitting around here shouldn't be making what they're making. Is it against the law to reduce that? Payments for, Tom said, yeah. Well, fire them and hire somebody else. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions on the budget, then we'll take this up on the 12th. We have actually two. We have one at the Center for University Park on Thursday, and then we have obviously the public hearing discussion on the budget, which will be on the 12th.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
if the board's going to recess, there is a time-sensitive issue about the donation of land to the city prior to the end of the year. Could that also be on the recessed agenda?
Yes. Okay, that
that's what
leaves
we're gonna
us
be trying to
the
do.
final item, which is item 13, which has to do with appointments to boards and commissions. There's a motion and a second to go into executive session for the purpose of considering appointments to the boards and commissions. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed, say nay. The motion passes. We're in executive session. there a motion for us to go back into open session? Is there a second? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed, say nay. All right, we're back in open session. For the purpose of appointments to boards and commissions, I would like to appoint Marquita Tyler to the Animal Services Advisory Board. All in favor of confirming her appointment indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. She is appointed. I would like to appoint to the Little Rock Scent Committee Irma Peterson as the Ward 2 representative. All in favor of confirming her appointment indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. She's appointed. For the Land Bank Commission, the Ward 1 representative, I'd like to appoint Jennifer Herron. All in favor of confirming her appointment indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. She's appointed. On the Little Rock Planning Commission, I'd like to confirm the reappointment of Paul Latour to the Planning Commission. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. He's appointed. On the Little Rock Port Authority, I'd like to appoint Ray Dillon to an unexpired term. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. He's appointed. And on the Racial and Cultural Diversity Commission, I'd like to appoint as the, as the Ward 1 representative, Julius Larry. All in favor of confirming that appointment indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. He's appointed. And on the Central Arkansas Library System Board of Trustees, I'd like to reappoint Annette Harrington and reappoint Sheila Wright, and also appoint Marilyn Porter and Sophia Sade. Is there a motion to confirm those appointments? And there's a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. They are confirmed as well. That concludes the items we have on our agenda. Is there a motion that we go into recess till the next meeting? There's a motion and a second to move into recess. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Thank you all very much. We are in recess until December 12th. At 4 p.m., yes, at 4 p.m.